light within our hearts, light within our thoughts, light within our words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. With me today on the show, I have my good friend David Slater, who is a spiritual counselor and intuitive. And I suppose it's always the obvious which escapes us till the end. It's always the last thing we think of is what's totally obvious. But it seems to me that in every situation that in which there's the potential for conflict, that automatically viewing it as adversarial is optional.
Mm-hmm.
That just because something is contrary to what we expected, or even contrary to what we would choose, doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't something really good to have happen.
I've had someone state this years ago, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. They said, I'd much rather be happy than right.
Okay.
And you'll watch an interpersonal dynamic happen where one person will say one thing, another person disagrees, and a argument will ensue. And what happens is the argument is over something that doesn't matter, and everyone has to be right. What's delightful is when you can say, well, I just choose to be happy. I see this person's argumentative. They want to be right. Well, let them be right, because if they aren't, they'll get exposed to how that doesn't work. And my point being is that we don't have to make conflict.
I kind of sort of agree and kind of find myself disagreeing.
Mm-hmm. We should argue about it. Kidding.
I think to me, if I come to a situation with an expectation of something I had planned, I can't tell you the number of times I wanted to do a particular video production and decided ahead of time that, okay, we're going to have X, Y, and Z. The very first time, so many years ago, that we did a holiday special, a 1-hour Christmas special for television. And I planned out every detail and got a really good crew, and everything was all lined up. And we came right down to doing it, and the equipment didn't work correctly. We pushed the button or whatever, and the machine would not work. So now I have 25 people in the studio all looking at me as I'm trying to decide how to salvage the situation, because they've all come down here to help me do this Christmas show, and I don't have anything for 2/3 of them to do if the machinery doesn't cooperate.
Mm-hmm.
And so intuitively, on the spur of the moment, I just said, everybody on the set will have a Christmas party in front of the camera. And so for the first Christmas show, it looks like I've got 15 guests all over the set. They were supposed to be my crew members, and the only reason they weren't behind the cameras instead of in front of them is because the other equipment we had in the studio refused to work correctly. And rather than send them home with an apology or cancel production or throw up my hands and say whatever, we all moved onto the set in front of the cameras, leaving only 3 people to run the cameras and a couple people in the control room. And then we would introduce a topic, and I would say, does anyone have a story to share? And we started passing the microphone around among all these people. And I had no idea that all those stories were present. The point to me, I guess, was to consider that the adversarial equipment the situation didn't need to be labeled adversarial just because the equipment wasn't cooperating.
Mm-hmm.
That it could be reinterpreted as an unexpected curveball, an unexpected development that ultimately turned out to be constructively formative because I was willing to work with it and because I wasn't in a hurry to assume that its primary nature was adversarial.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we say adversity is optional, it doesn't mean there aren't things in life that will hurt. It doesn't mean that there aren't things in life that will argue with us. We don't have to presume negative intent. You know, the person who stands in our way may not have any negative intention toward us at all. They may be trying to protect us from what they perceive to be a dangerous circumstance.
Mm-hmm. It. By the way, I loved your solution. That's a fantastic one. It's like, and it's funny how often, well, let's make it a party is a great answer to a lot of different things, and to allow an experience to grow.
To allow an experience to be something other than what you envisioned.
Right. Another thing I like to share with folks is that when somebody chooses something for themselves, it doesn't mean it's a choice against you. Mm-hmm. And I'll see so much human conflict. They chose to do this. They chose to do that. Yes, they did. That isn't a choice against you. It is a choice for themselves. And they want to make it an adversarial situation.
Well, or they want to avoid a situation that they would otherwise experience as painful.
Right.
Because maybe, you know, here we're back to why do I always have to be the grown-up one, but maybe they don't have the understanding that just because it's not what I wanted doesn't mean it's adversarial.
I had a delightful time with my kids. I was single dad, so every other weekend they were with me.
Mm-hmm.
And they got away with a lot of things that they didn't get away with at their mom's house, which is not an uncommon situation. But they couldn't get away with the four-letter F word, and that was fair. They would say, that's not fair, and Dad comes unglued. Because I would stop and say, tell me something that is fair. Anything you find in this world that is fair, it came at the cost of somebody else, and that's not fair.
Mm-hmm.
And so many times people are saying, well, that's not fair because they want their way to happen, which isn't fair.
Well, in that scenario, they're simply playing king of the hill.
Yes.
Which is where I would say it's not about who's the king of the hill, who dominates.
Uh-huh.
It's about all of us joining hands around the hill and making sure that everybody has a good time.
Yes. And
nobody's getting pushed off. No one's getting put down. No one's getting shoved aside.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's being included.
Right. And to live life that way, to have the concept that it's not a fight. How many times have we received
It's not a fight, it's a discovery.
Yes.
It's an exploration.
And how many times are we told life is a struggle and we've got to yada yada, and it's.
Well, and that's exactly what we're talking about. That presumes adversity instead of regarding an adversarial nature as optional.
And when we can go through life going just the opposite. Our society teaches us so many things, but it comes down to one very simple thing. We tend to fight nature.
Okay.
We level an entire forest to build houses. I remember Wouldn't
it make more sense to build a house into the hillside?
Yes. And then you have heating and cooling is automatic, which is great. And it's funny because...
and they might complain about all the rocks in the soil.
Uh-huh.
So use the rocks to build the house. Then you'll have a fireproof house.
Again, we have to fight it. And if we're going to fight nature, guess what the end result is every single time? We fight nature that we can't be angry, we can't yada yada yada. Experience it, love it, let it organically grow. What if relationships between human beings was, oh, let's see where this goes? Wouldn't it be delightful to say, wow, I love you, and I have no idea where that's going, but let's go find out.
Mm.
I don't even know what form the love is going to take.
I will never forget a particular house my former life partner and I looked at once when we were contemplating a places to buy. And it was in a hilly area. And whoever the builder was, had literally come in and carved a notch out of the side of the hill and built a 2-story house on the edge of the notch so that the driveway was between the house and the hill. 2-story house. The roof of the house was even with the top of the bank, but there's a driveway between. And we said, so where's the backyard? And the realtor said, up there. And I just thought, where was the wisdom in this?
Gotta fight nature.
You would need a 50-foot ladder to get to the backyard.
Right.
When they could have just built it into the hillside, had the driveway on the opposite side, and you would have simply had a back porch on the second floor.
Uh-huh.
But it just, right into your backyard. But as it was, the property was divided, and this 2 or 3 acres of property, and over half of it wasn't accessible without a ladder.
Uh-huh. Because we must be adverse to whatever's around us. And that's ridiculous.
Well, and the house was built all out of wood in an area that was notorious for forest fires. If you're going to live where there are forest fires, wouldn't it make sense to build out of stone?
And yet, here we do what we keep on having in the news the past decade at least, is the big news about where the latest wildfire is.
Yeah, if you build a stone house with a slate roof and, just make sure that the trees are all at least 30 feet from the house.
Yeah.
What are you going to lose?
The wax candles on the inside of the house.
Evidently.
Yeah. And there's the flow with things and there's the flow against things. And with the wildfires, if we just let fires actually happen, then we wouldn't have the problem. Because what's happening is now we've gone a century with some places that have never had a fire, and basically it's a giant tinderbox. Mm-hmm. And then we get our hands all up in the air because, these $1 million homes built in the middle of a forest that hasn't had a forest fire in a century got burned.
You expected what to happen?
Exactly. I found a fun thing to do in life is to say, that happened in physical realm? What a surprise. And in having that concept, it takes the bite out of that unhappy thing that happens. Oh, I'm short on money for this bill? Oh, let me act surprised. Mm-hmm. And I don't have to blame anyone, because if we look for blame or fault, we find it every time.
Yeah. Notwithstanding, though, I think there is a certain societal responsibility to take care of its members. Mm-hmm. And there are times where the greedy unfortunately triumph. Mm-hmm. And through no fault of their own, poor people do wind up suffering really horrible losses, mm-hmm. Because of the irresponsibility of wealthier managers and administrators. Mm-hmm. So there is all of that, but at the same time, coming back to our central topic, adversity is optional. Mm-hmm. If the rich man takes all the resources of the poor, mm-hmm. guess who has more freedom? And guess who is more owned by the things he possesses? Mm-hmm. Guess who has the ability to walk away and start a new life anywhere? And guess who would have to exhaust half of his net worth to move 10 blocks?
Yes.
I mean, it really plays in a mischievous, almost devious way with our definitions of wealth. Uh-huh. I had someone suggest to me recently that all you need to be happy is more money. And I kind of thought, well, if that were the case, millionaires would be the happiest people on earth. I don't think there's anyone who believes that.
Right.
which is where I come back to saying money is just a tool.
Mm-hmm.
Use it to serve life, to serve the growth of your soul, to serve the health and strength of your community. If the only thing you use it to serve is yourself, you'll be like Narcissus, withering away to nothing at the riverbank. It's our relationships and our togetherness that make the difference, and it's those relationships that empower us to avoid interpreting every potential conflict adversely.
Wouldn't it be phenomenal if we started in our lives having relationships, and again, no particular title to them, without adversity? If what we did was experience and enjoy and celebrate. Prime example, and someone I've interacted with, we couldn't always be together.
Mm-hmm.
And our lives hadn't reached a point of melding together. And they were having such an issue at being apart because we were in that delightful stage. Mm-hmm. And I said, here's what we can do. We can be torn apart about not being in proximity, or when we're not in proximity, celebrate the fact that we have such an amazing relationship. And they didn't grasp it at first, but then they found themselves on our times apart having great days and enjoying what happened in the day. Mm-hmm. And it evolved to that location. But wouldn't it be, what if that was how we did it all? We don't have to miss people. And of course,
there's something enviable, as I look at a life from the perspective of my dogs, mm-hmm. that all they need to be happy is 5 or 10 minutes of undivided attention from me. Could be throwing a stick in the backyard. Mm-hmm. They don't require going anywhere or anything expensive or lavish. There's just the fact that I started a hysterical game the other day with my little pit bull puppy. Was outside gathering up some garden tools in the wheelbarrow, and I saw him standing there watching me with his head cocked to one side, and I thought, what the hey? And so I started running around the wheelbarrow. And of course, for a dog, you see anything run, you have to chase it. Uh-huh. But I knew making that many tight turns, he would not be able to turn as quickly as I did. So he couldn't catch me because I was making all these tight turns running around the wheelbarrow, and he kept sliding on every corner, trying to get you. Finally, after 5 or 6 times, I was getting tired and had to stop. And then it took me 5 minutes to get him to calm down again when he finally caught up to me. But for him, it was the most hysterical game. And all we were doing is running in circles around the wheelbarrow. The funny end of that, though, was that when I tried it about an hour later, now that he already knew the game, yeah. he jumped between me and the wheelbarrow first. So I could never make a right turn because he was always between me and the wheelbarrow, and that prevented the whole thing from happening. But
and they call them dumb animals.
He's no dummy. But it was such a simple thing that involved really nothing more than having complete attention on each other.
I was asked one time what I was looking for in the ideal mate. And I said, oh yeah, a dog. And they looked at me funny, and I said, think about it. If I step outside for 15 minutes, they're ecstatic when I walk home or when I come back in. Mm-hmm. If I'm normally home in 8 hours but don't get there till 10 hours, they're more happy when I arrive. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could do this for someone? Mm-hmm. If we can say, oh, you've been gone 15 minutes and I missed you. And instead of someone being delayed and coming unglued because they inconvenienced you, oh man, I missed you for an extra 2 hours.
I was worried sick.
Yeah.
Well, on one sense, I suppose it's nice to be missed, but on the other hand, I'm back now, aren't I?
Yes.
Let's celebrate.
Indeed. Can't we change adversity and conflict into
or just
celebration?
Not presume adversity in the first place.
Yes.
That to not assume that it's a bad thing or that it's that you meant to do that.
Uh-huh.
Why would you even think I meant to do that?
Right.
Whatever that is.
Uh-huh.
Maybe it was just traffic. Maybe it was something slipped my mind.
Mhm.
Maybe it was any number of things. But to remember in each moment that adversity is optional. It's not. It doesn't have to be interpreted as being adverse. Somebody gave me a suggestion once in terms of submitting book manuscripts as a writer, that each time you send out a package with a manuscript in it, in your mind, in invisible ink or whatever, how you want to think of it, you write across the top, "To the publisher who is able to appreciate this work." And that way, if you don't get a response, you will know that it simply got lost in the mail and went to the wrong publisher.
Yes, exactly.
And that the publisher who can appreciate the work didn't get it.
Right.
To give yourself and your work the benefit of the doubt that way.
Uh-huh. To not presume rejection or think that they're out to get you or
that out of the 100,000 manuscripts they got this week, somehow they noticed yours and they hated it.
Yeah.
After 100,000 manuscripts, they still had enough negative emotion left to direct some right at your manuscript and only your manuscript.
I like that. I like that a lot because we never...
I think it takes more faith to believe that than to simply believe that it got forgotten in the slush pile.
Oh, that's...
But the way many writers, and understandably so, I mean, you put your heart and soul into that manuscript, I understand, but we have to remember the world is a shared space. And there's some really important interconnections, interpersonal relationships that need to happen.
Uh-huh.
And to be patient for when and how those happen so that everything comes together, just like the blooming of the flowers in spring and the changing of the leaves in autumn. It's a million different things that have to find their way into harmony.
I have had the situation where I've been told someone that betrayal starts and ends with us.
Okay.
And they look at me very funny, and I said, "Okay, do you remember those times when there was a miscommunication and you swore you were betrayed, and then resolve the miscommunication, and it's over? How different did that time feel than when you were honestly and truly betrayed?" The exact same. The feeling of betrayal starts and ends with us. Whether we're honestly or inadvertently betrayed, it's the perception we have of being betrayed.
Essentially, we're responding to our own perception, and our perception is a result of an interpretation of more or less information than we would prefer.
Yes. Wouldn't it be delightful to live that way? To say, this is what's happening.
Which brings us back to adversity is optional.
Yes.
You don't have to assume that the missing information would confirm your negative interpretation.
Yes. And I remember talking to somebody and they said, paranoia is a heightened sense of awareness. And I laughed. And I looked at them and they weren't.
Okay.
And it was like, I think I want to gently walk away right now, because they truly believed that paranoia was a heightened sense of awareness to go through life with. And
I suppose in some ways it is, but it's awareness of only half the picture.
So it's heightened from what to what is the interesting thing.
Well, it's not heightened awareness of the positive possibilities.
Yes. And
it's heightened awareness of only the negative ones. So you're really only looking at half the situation.
Wouldn't it be a fun topic sometime in the future to realize that everything is a blessing?
It doesn't feel like it at the time.
Exactly. Remove the concept of time and everything's a blessing.
Um,
Like I said, great topic for another time. But it doesn't have to be adversarial.
The biggest thing that allows it to remain empowering for me, and it's not easy, I think we need to remember that, is coming back to that place of wholeness. That when you see the wholeness,
Mm-hmm.
when you see the wholeness, the adversity is optional.
Yes.
If you don't see the wholeness, everything can look like adversity.
Indeed. Indeed.
Thank you very much for being such a wonderful guest today.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching.